we have an illustrious panel who I'm going to introduce one by one to come into the stage to speak about the interesting topic of how to roll out GenAI transformation across an enterprise. Ooh, I like that. Now, we have the chair of the panel, Dan Hoadley from vLex. Please give him a round of applause.
Okay, welcome to the Hydrosphere. I'm going to try and warm my voice up for a second because I had a bit of a good night last night. So actually, just to give everyone an opportunity just to kind of get themselves in the zone, let's just go, Vicky, from you down to me. Really quick, snappy intro. Tell us who you are.
So I'm Vicky Abberton from Counsel. My background is 15 years as a private M&A lawyer. I joined from Counsel 10 years ago to set up the news service and then moved into commercial, and now I run our partnerships and development.
And I'm Matt Kennedy, or Michael Kennedy. I run a R&D team, Addleshaw Goddard. So that is a mixture of looking at future technology, bit of development work, a bit of a buy and build strategy, bringing different technology in to give it our lawyers.
I'm Alex. I'm CTO and COO at Silkin, so responsible for all things technology. Silkin, Law Firm of the Year as of last week, and also best known for our employment work and our work in the creative economy.
And I'm Tara Waters. I previously was a partner and chief digital officer at Ashurst, where I was in charge of GenAI enterprise rollout, amongst many things. Currently now operating my own digital transformation consultancy.
Nice. And actually, I think, Tara, you have the rare accolade of probably being the first person that could say that they rolled a big piece of GenAI software out across an entire law firm.
I think the first to publicly admit that they did it enterprise-wide at day one.
Well, okay, you're being modest, I think. But so look, what we're going to talk about today is we've got an entire kind of room full of vendors, including me, trying to sell you products that, to some degree or another, have GenAI baked into them. And what this panel's really about is trying to understand, once you've made the decision to buy one of these products, and I kind of have in mind the big ones. I'm not going to name any of them, but I think we know who they are because we can see their names everywhere at this conference. But that's the end of the product spectrum that I'm thinking about. Once you've made your mind up that you want one of these for your firm, how the hell do you actually roll it out across the business? How do you make that work? But before we get there, and we've got a nice blend of people, right? I'm a vendor. I used to work at a law firm. Vicky, you're a vendor now, but you also used to be a lawyer. And then we've got people that are either at firms or were at a firm and then consulting. Let's start with the first question. Quick hands up. Who here has rolled out a GenAI platform in an enterprise? We've got a few in the audience as well. Right. Who wants to take this one, just to get us going? Why? Why do this? Let's pick any of these products that we can think of. Make me understand, make all of us understand really quickly why we'd even bother putting ourselves through the hassle of rolling these things out.
I think I'll take this one.
Yeah.
I think for in particular maybe some of the bigger law firms, their managing partner was invited to attend Pebble Beach. They all got told that they need to have GenAI, and they all went back to their firms and said, "Make GenAI happen."
Okay.
That is a slightly cynical take, but probably quite true. So for us, I think there's two elements, or there's maybe three elements to it. There's clearly a lot of pent up demand. And people want to use this. They are using this. Putting it within a framework of control that will deliver in a consistent way is obviously important. It's huge benefits, whether it is time saving, efficiency, being able to do stuff that, frankly, we wouldn't have done before. Doing full reviews of a very large document set, whereas you might cherry pick, in the past. So there's that obvious efficiency gain. There is an element of it of clients are asking for it. So you're going to look pretty silly if you're not doing it. I've had probably 4 or 5 RFPs in the last couple of months where they've explicitly said, what is your legal technology strategy? How are you using GenAI to save us money or improve quality? So those are kind of some of the flavors. There is obviously a bit of following the crowd, I think, from a lot of this. It's the hot new topic. We're not having this conference in the metaverse, which we might have been talking about 2 years ago. But it is very much, there is real efficiency gains to be gained. There is new stuff that we couldn't do before without GenAI, and I think that is quite exciting.
Yeah.
I'd echo that from a law firm point of view, in that clients are asking for this stuff, and clients are expecting us, not necessarily expecting us to have technology, but expecting us to be able to do what the tech allows us to do. And I'd probably add another reason is that it does work pretty good. Like, it's pretty good stuff. It's pretty good tech. Used properly and sensibly, it's really effective at delivering on, like, yes, the efficiency piece, but also the unlocking new services and like business models that we've sort of wanted to do for quite a long time, from an innovation perspective, but we've always been hamstrung a little bit by you can only scale so much if you use human capital to scale. When you start getting better technology, you can unlock a few more like business opportunities, which is then easier to sell internally to a firm. And then if you line that up with client pressure, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, Vicky, I'm going to come to you in a second. It sounds like, having listened to the three of you, the real motivation, I'm going to put words in your mouth here, the real motivation is a mixture of something intrinsic to the technology. It lets us do things we couldn't do without it. It gives us new capability, we think. But also there's something extrinsic going on, which is actually there's a feeling of pressure from clients to be seen to be going in a particular direction. There might even be a little bit of a FOMO effect going on. I mean, I am aggressively putting words in your mouths here, and you can challenge me back on this, but I don't think I don't think this all gravitates back purely to efficiency or capability. There's something else going on here. There's a Pebble Beach effect.
There is, I think, on the FOMO point, a huge part of our jobs as trying to do like digital transformation in law firm is to fight the FOMO and to try and be like, just because, I don't know, the partnership or a partner or a group of lawyers wants it and is demanding something does not mean we should do it.
Yeah.
We should do it if it makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, this is where I kind of wanted the Vicky effect a bit here, which is that kind of, you practice, 15 years doing corporate? Yeah. So like channeling that experience and then hearing what I think is the motivation, like what's the perspective there on?
Well, I mean, we speak to a lot of firms, so I see this now as well, and there is we get told a lot about the client demand. I think there is sometimes a little bit of the FOMO. And I agree that there is a big job internally of people to like really control that and work on that, because what sometimes happens as well is people aren't thinking about how they would use something. They just have seen something. So they're not really saying, I really want this and this is how I would use it. They're just thinking, well, we need to have it. There is a slight, I think, need to be seen to be keeping up. And probably as well, an element of future-proofing. I think lots of people are very nervous, very unsure, understandably, about where things are going to go. And so they're trying to look at this and say, how can we future-proof what we are doing as a firm? So there's, I completely understand all the different drivers, and I completely agree with your point that it's super, super important to not panic, to stop and think about how something would be used, why it's being used, who would use it, whether they really would use it, what you've got to do, and so on. There's a whole heap of things beyond just, let's just get it because it's GenAI. Yeah. That's not the reason to get it.
I think if I could maybe put a bit more of a positive gloss on FOMO, I think there's a really strong talent attraction element of hiring lawyers is still a very competitive endeavor. Hiring good lawyers is a very competitive endeavor. And so actually you want your lawyers who are coming in, whether they're, NQs, whether they're associates, whether they're, attracting new partners, you want them to come into an environment that helps them do their best work, feels modern, feels new, feels like you're innovating and moving forward. And if you come in and say, but you're not allowed to use any of these new technologies, we're not investing in that, it sets the wrong tone. And so, Mike is absolutely right. You only do stuff, you only invest in stuff where it makes financial sense to do so. But there is a sort of a slightly softer softer business case of how do we ensure that our people have the best tools to do the job, to feel productive, to feel like they're moving forward. And some of that is harder to measure in terms of ROI, but from a quality of life perspective for the lawyers, from a perception perspective for the lawyers, I think it is quite a valuable part of the overall value proposition for this stuff.
Yeah, and it's that softer set of motivations that actually I kind of want this panel to go a bit closer towards, because, I tend to be quite blunt when I do public speaking, and I tend to be quite honest, but we are fed on LinkedIn a barrage, really, of things that I'm going to suggest are complete crap. And the word transform has kind of been tortured to the point, really, where it's kind of lost a lot of meaning. And so hearing from people that have actually done this is important, because it kind of brings a bit of meaning back into everything. So we found our motivation, or our set of motivations. We want new capability. We don't want to be left behind. We want to attract new talent. We want to be able to show our clients that we're moving in a direction that they feel on board with. Then how do we pick the vendor or vendors that we're going to partner with? How does that work? Is it analytical, or is it more coming from the heart? Are we kind of driven more by the fact that, we have a CEO join a call from JFK Airport and makes us feel good? Or are we kind of thinking really concretely about the capabilities the products really give us? I am being quite gritty with this.
Yeah. I mean, you should obviously start by reading Tara's excellent benchmarking report. But then I think it's both. There are kind of hard technical things you're trying to evaluate. Probably not so much at the model level, because most of the big tools, although there's some differences, they're kind of marginal. They're mostly built on similar or the same models. There's a little bit of fine-tuning, all that sort of stuff. But by and large, in our experience, there are differences, but they're not huge differences. But it is about how it's the user experience. It's the human-centric part of how easy is it for a lawyer to take that tool and use it to get a task done. And I think that's where when we were evaluating tools, and we evaluated quite a lot of them, that was the marked difference. We ran the same matters through a bunch of tools. By and large, the end product was similar. It was still finding the same terms that we were looking for. It was still finding the same bits of an investigation we were running. But the lawyers were a bit like, meh. And the others, they were like, well, you're going to pry this out of my cold, dead hands. And it's not... It was very weird for me as kind of quite a factual, rational technologist to go, yeah, but they came out with the same answer. Why is this the case? And it's like, well, actually, that one really guides you. You don't really need to know how to prompt. There's good workflow. The tone of voice is better. It doesn't randomly put stuff all in block caps because it's only been trained on US contracts. It's that sort of stuff that's still technical, but it's sort of softer technical. Again, it's the how productive can lawyers be with tool A versus tool B, and that's not always just a hard numbers game. I think.
I think like the minimum baseline, right, has to produce outputs that people find usable, that are not, on the face of them, hallucinated and poorly constructed. Most tools offer that. You have to measure that as part of the assessment process. I think you need that data to back up. But my experience in working with some clients recently has been people are kind of like, yeah, data. Actually, surprisingly, data. Okay, yeah. So this tells us it ticks that box.
Yeah.
But actually, what's the compelling investment story? And I think it's very much the lawyer feedback, both qualitative and quantitative. And I know people that are now, because there are more vendors, running head-to-head evaluations of similar tools, and they are, there are clear winners coming out of those. Not always the same winners, but there are clear winners coming out of those. So you really have to be driven by the lawyer preference. And I think the other thing I'm hearing a lot, talking across the market, whenever I hear someone's announcing their new provider, is the partnership that people feel from the vendors. It's different. It's the customer success service that they're delivering, because a lot of law firms, even those that have internal teams, they're still under-resourced ultimately to do an enterprise rollout. So the support and partnership that you feel from the vendor becomes very, very important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we on the under resource point, I think that's absolutely right. And that we've got a really big team at Addleshaws, and we do a lot of our own rollouts. And I think we are the thorn in the side of a lot of CS teams, to be honest, across the industry. Sorry if you're in the audience. Yeah, we do apologise for the many years, because we do a lot on our own. We do a lot ourselves, and I think Alex's point around how do you know if something is better than something else? It's using it and playing around with it and actually giving it to people and getting that really high level feedback, which is I just like this, or I don't like this, or it works in this way. And I'll take on do you want the CEO to ring you from JFK as well?
Yeah.
I don't think it's about individuals. I don't think it's about the person at the very top, but I do think it's about the vision. And I think it's about what is the plan? Where is this company going? Why are they going that way? Are they going in a certain direction? Because that's what, I don't know if you follow a checklist of where we should go, is that why? Or is it because they're listening to their clients?
Yeah.
And I think the biggest, I guess, like green flag for me with a vendor is when I go through, well, why don't you do this? And actually, I would probably want this in there, and I want a bit more around here, and this is where I want to focus. And they go, oh, actually, yeah, I've not thought about that, but we will maybe not do that exactly because they're not just my toy, like they work for everybody, but they might build some of that into a solution that will then go market wide. The speed of that execution is something that really stands out with some of the, like, not just GenAI, like the good vendors we've worked with over the years always have that ability to not fully pivot, but realize that's a priority and that matters. I can see the value, I'll do it.
So that kind of finding, so maybe my fairly cynical kind of view was that it's all about the
You don't need
glitz
to
and
ring
the
me
glam. Yeah.
from beyond the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I ever get the opportunity to call you from JFK, I will. But
Call me back when you're in bed.
Yeah,
Like, I had a sleep, not in bed after.
But I mean, like unpacking that, the part of this you're hinting at, all of you, is this partnership dimension. The fact that actually, to kind of like use a kind of a nasty analogy, the two of you are getting into bed together. Like these are big ticket items. You know, like they run well into 6 digits. It's a big commitment for the firm. It's a big line item on the tech department's budget, or wherever that budget's sitting. Vicky, like, let's bring it back to you. You know, how? Tell me as a vendor, actually, like what you might think about how vendors in this market position themselves to be a good partner.
Well, I think there's a couple of things, and it feeds in. Actually, you said something when we were talking before that was really kind of resonated. And I think flexibility is one of the things. And I sort of mean it in a really wide sense. Like some vendors will sit there and be like, well, this is our onboarding and this is how we do this. And this is, and then you said, well, we like to take on the onboarding. And I was thinking, well, people need to listen to that. Vendors need to listen. You might have this amazing onboarding program. You might focus on certain things, but if a firm is telling that vendor, well, actually, we want to do this, or we want this done, that, you've got to go with that. You can't push. So if a vendor is constantly saying to a firm, well, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we focus on, and all you're getting is they're not listening to the firm. For me, as a buyer, when in my fee earning days, there's a red flag. You're just not hearing what I'm saying. Your product might be amazing, your onboarding might be fantastic, but you're not listening to what I'm saying and reacting to that. And that at day dot, to me, if that's the point of buying, that's not going to get any better the whole way through.
Yeah.
That really is. And the other thing is honesty, because I think there's an awful lot, and I understand entirely why, but an awful lot of marketing speak around things being rolled out, and I get it. However, when you're sitting down having final buying discussions, when you're talking about the development of things and so on, vendors really being honest about what things can't do as well as what they can do creates a real trust. If somebody is constantly telling me something, I'm like, really? Or if you're querying it, if you're saying, well, does it do this? And they kind of go, oh, yeah, we can absolutely do this in that time frame. Yeah. They won't be able to do everything that you say immediately. So really establishing some honesty. And I think if a vendor is telling you things it can't do as well as things it can do, and what the roadmap is, being honest about the roadmap, even if that doesn't totally fit, yes, they might be flexible. You need to be flexible. If it's really important to a firm, maybe, and you're getting that feedback, maybe you adjust that roadmap. But being honest about it, I think is really valuable. And sometimes vendors seem nervous to do that. But I think especially with the level of fatigue at law firms of another solution, another this, honesty goes down really, really well, and that sets up a really good relationship.
And yeah, that's long term. That's thinking about the long term and not thinking about the sale this year, to hit the numbers this year. That's thinking in 5 years' time, together we've done something amazing, but we can't do it tomorrow. But I can do it over time.
Yeah, I would want to see that a vendor is sitting there thinking about it long term, is looking after me long term. That partnership is not just this first year. That partnership is not about just that initial sale. It is that long term view, and they're showing that in full honesty and listening to me.
Right. Okay. I mean, well, that's so. Any vendors in the room, you heard it there. Honesty, flexibility. Our roadmap is very flexible, if that counts.
So it's not a pitch down. Yeah.
I think everybody has to be, right? A little bit flexible on that roadmap.
Sometimes I wonder, actually, we do have a roadmap. It's that flexible. But so, look, Alex, let's come back to you for a second, and Tara as well. So you've found your motivation. You found the vendor you want to work with. You've gone through the motions of kind of proving out why you're going to make a particular choice. You're going to go with vendor X. And it's going to cost a bomb, because it does. Who in the firm owns the responsibility for making sure that that's successful? Like, whose head is on the line if a year later someone says, Alex, why the bloody hell did you buy this? Who owns that?
See, it's interesting. It's probably me, but it's but actually for us, you know, at the Silkin, it was very much a joint decision. We're still relatively small, very flexible. You know, we're known for taking calculated bets. But this is not a pure technology project. You know, it isn't like, oh, I'm going to give you a new HR system, and if you want to book holiday, you're going to have to use the new HR system. Yeah. You know, there is a huge amount of discretion within the usage of GenAI, no matter how much you try and embed it into the processes. So for us, the way we've done it is, while I've sort of sponsored it along with our joint managing partners, our chief practice transformation officers have really been driving that along with our knowledge lawyers. And so it kind of takes a village to do this. Technologists can help with, like, here's the structure of prompting, and we'll make sure the single sign-on works, and we'll help people build workflows. But fundamentally, it's the knowledge lawyers who are in the practices, are doing the bundle meetings, are able to talk about, okay, this use case, that's worked really well. This use case, that was rubbish. Let's not try that again. And try and start embedding it and sharing best practice. They've always done it with knowledge and the way we use precedents. And so it's an extension. It's not a reinvention of the knowledge lawyer's role. But it is a good central grounding place. We've taken a view that, we've had some ideas as we're rolling out of what it would be useful for, and we've seen green shoots. But we asked people to experiment, and then we asked our knowledge lawyers as the kind of GenAI champions in each practice group to consolidate those and then produce practice-specific kind of, here's how you do this within employment or investigations or disputes or whatever it is. And so there's no one head on the chopping block, I don't think. That it's probably still
That's
mine.
That's a shame. I was hoping you'd say.
It's probably still mine, but it is much more. It's not a pure technology thing. And if anyone goes at it as a pure technology project, it's probably going to fail. And I think that's kind of coming back to the vendor point. The vendors who come to us with a bunch of tech salespeople, it's like, yeah, but how are you going to explain this to a lawyer about how to use it? Whereas the vendors who have embedded lawyers within their teams, within their customer success structures, resonates much better. It's a much easier conversation where someone actually who knows what they're talking about in terms of practice. And you were saying this earlier. It just resonates so much more, and is so much more likely for that training, for that onboarding to land properly, compared to someone saying, click this button, click this button.
Yeah. I mean, Tara, does that kind of align?
Yeah.
By the way, I should just say, I didn't pick up water as I joined the stage, so I'm going to stand up, get some water. Does anyone want one?
I'm all right.
Fine. I think trying to create and emphasize that there is shared accountability is really critical. And I think you will experience resistance from the teams you're trying to share the accountability with if you're, essentially the lead sponsor. But, certainly in my old firm and with clients I work with now, I always push there should be co-sponsors. It should never be just, the digital or the innovation team. It should always be co-sponsored with ideally multiple other teams like knowledge or like particular practices. If it was a domain-specific tool, for example, you would want specific practice heads signed up to it. My personal view, and again, my approach is often like, okay, like step one is you start with the partners, because it is the partners that need to drive from the top down the buy-in to tell their teams, this is what the firm has decided to do. We think it's important. We support the use of these tools in the right way, and we expect you to engage. And again, that's really critical, I think, in the implementation plan, is to set the accountability at the top and make sure they realize it has to flow down from them.
Yeah, and that's quite interesting. Is we had our partner conference last November, and we spent Saturday morning teaching all our partners to prompt and rolling out this tool to them first. And I was told last night that's really unusual, that most people don't roll out to partners first. And I was like, well, why? Like they're the owners of the firm. They're the leaders of the firm. If they're not hands on using this day one or day minus 2 months in our case, how are they going to encourage the associates and sort of lead from the front, as you said? So I do think partner leadership, broad base, not just the innovation partner or the managing partner or whoever, but like a broad swath of partnership really needs to be engaged.
A broad base of consensus at the top of the business kind of gives everyone the direction and air cover. I mean, Vicky, coming back to you, vendor to vendor here for a moment. I mean, it's weird at the moment, isn't it, listening to some of this, because this is the first time I can think of where law firms have ever bought products where it is basically impossible to say specifically why they're buying the product. You get very good answers, and they're all, I think, as good as they can be, but it's not like buying Westlaw or iManage or something like, I'm buying Westlaw because I need access to case law, I need a DMS. With this class of product, it is much harder to be succinctly kind of specific. This is why I'm buying this, because it gives me this capability. But from someone that works on the vendor side, I find that, I kind of like it suits me, but it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is a bit weird. I think the difficulty is fundamentally when you're buying something today, you've got to be constantly remembering that a lawyer's job is not to use GenAI.
Yeah.
A lawyer's job is to do their transaction for me, to complete an M&A transaction, using whatever tools are best to do that. And the difficulty is as well, what is best in the moment to get that job done is not always best in the longer term. So you've got to balance that. And I think that's really difficult for firms, and it's a strange one. The other thing that I think is a bit difficult for vendors and firms is that you're kind of having to look at what helps my lawyers do the job now, but what will that look like in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years? Because you're always told, and I still think this is the right thing to ask, but what problem are you trying to solve with it? Now, if you ask me, what problem am I trying to solve in an M&A transaction, I will base my problems on the way I do the job now. But that might not be the way the job is done in 2 years, 5 years. So you've got to have a mind to both. And that's as well why I have a slightly different view, and I appreciate I'm in the luxury of not being in a firm having to make that decision, as to the accountability factor, in that I think firms have always been quite historically, if you get a new solution, it's so difficult to onboard, it's such a nightmare. If you get people on, all this sort of thing, if that actually turns out not to be right or something else comes along the market, it's a bit of a nightmare. You're like, we're all used to using this now, et cetera, et cetera. I really think firms have got to be more willing to accept the risk that comes in the market the way it is now. Things will change. Our products will change. There'll be loads of acquisitions. Somebody may come along with a new product that does the thing that's doing even better. There'll be so many reasons why it might not actually work out. And so if people are constantly terrified that they've not made the right decision, they'll just be paralyzed by indecision and not adopt anything. There's got to be a little bit more acceptance of risk
Yeah.
And so you make good decisions, but you don't go, if this doesn't work out.
Yes, you need to be clear about the motivation in the first place, but then leave enough buffer to say to yourself, in 12 months' time, 24 months' time, some of this might look different when we're
Yeah.
going to need. I mean, Mike, like, how do you give yourself that buffer? Like, what if vendor X does get acquired by vendor Y and it all changes, or what if vendor X has grown way too quick and it kind of like collapses in on itself? I mean, we've seen that happen in this market before. And we're very, very, very early days right now. How does a firm insulate themselves against that problem?
I think some of the, main strategic stuff is don't agree anything over a year at the moment, which again, CS guys, I'm sorry, in the room, because not very nice. Because that keeps you flexible, it keeps you able to move, it protects you from that stuff. If you're locked into 5 years and someone gets acquired, that is a pain, and that's difficult to deal with, and we've been there before doing that type of situation. But it's keeping yourself flexible, doing that, and doing a bit of this is why the relationship helps, because you will know what is coming. And I know stuff comes out of left field, and acquisitions do, and like strategic change does, or collapse would come out of nowhere. I wouldn't go, that'll happen in 6 months, that's on our roadmap. So knowing and having some of those conversations, knowing some of that does help you prepare. Being flexible in your own strategy to make sure that you're not locking in for long terms. You're not going super high ticket as well straight away. Like, you don't need every single person in the firm to have it day one. You might grow that and grow it a bit more.
Land and expand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and try and use people to push it out. Sorry.
So I kind of disagree. I do disagree with that last point.
Of giving it everybody.
Oh, we've given it to everybody.
Yeah.
We were, we had originally thought about going for a relatively small group. Like, well, actually, maybe we just give it to this group, or maybe we kind of build a paralegal hub for AI. And it's so quickly, because as you were saying, we don't know exactly how it's going to be used.
Yeah.
If you winnow it down too much, you lose that experimentation surface. So we have gone enterprise-wide, and I think we felt, and my bosses, our joint managing partners, felt really strongly that we couldn't have a culture of haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
And so we did go enterprise-wide day one. So I mean, that won't be right for everyone, and there are some tools. Like, we have a patent drafting AI tool, which is very cool. We haven't given that to everyone. That's like, half a dozen patent lawyers, great.
Yeah.
But I don't
I think
agree with that kind of just narrow.
Yeah, I think I'm almost making a differentiation between you buy something that you push enterprise, and this is then where firm strategy is completely different in the way people do things. So we built out AGPT, I guess early 2023. That is, everybody has that. And almost from day one, we're like, everybody can have access to this. What that did enable us to do is have super flexibility of saying, actually, that serves your needs. I don't need to roll this out enterprise-wide because you're this is delivering for you at this level. Maybe in the future, you get swept up in a wider license growth of a bigger tool. Okay. But I think this is where firms will always be different. And I think you have different plans that are in the works from long time ago that almost
The reality is, though, I think it's also important to keep in mind, and I've been working much more with the SME market, which was a new world for me because I'd only really ever been a really big law, is there are just some firms, and some of your firms, if you're in the audience, you will not have the budget to buy an enterprise-wide license for some of the big providers. You just will not be able to afford it, unfortunately. I tell the providers all the time that you're pricing yourselves out of markets. So I tell them that, and if you hear it, you can tell me, and I'll tell them that again for you. Yeah. So sometimes your hand might get forced, and then I think it is around the strategy of whoever's being in charge of that implementation of managing that, because that can be very, as you say, I was very against have and have nots, which is exactly why at Ashurst we rolled out fully to everyone as well. So if you're in a situation where there is a have and have not situation, you have to manage that very, very carefully, and you can do that in a positive way in terms of, so I'm working with a firm right now where we're focusing in on core practice areas, and those are the areas that were most engaged in the pilot, for example, so they are getting rewarded for that engagement, but we're making sure that every team has at least one license, and so we can make sure we are helping some of that experimentation, exploration space.
Yeah.
But what we can't do is offer them all licenses. So you need to think carefully. But there's ways through that that can make that positive, and then you can work with them and be like, well, let's build that business case. Let's go for the early renewal. Like, let's trigger some extra pricing benefits, because you are going to now be banging on the managing partner's door saying, we only have one license, we've explored it, we found all these things we can do with it, why am I being stopped?
But on the other side, I mean, the have and have not thing is interesting, but we're still at a time where actually enthusiasm for these products is not uniform across the firm by any means. In fact, there's a lot of antipathy still among certain lawyers. There's a lot of lawyers basically that hate this stuff still and want it to go away. Is that, Vicky, is that true? Or am I still being cynical?
I'm not sure there's loads that hate it and want it to
Loads
go away.
and loads, they're everywhere.
I think there's quite a few that don't really know what to do, and also that, frankly, and I completely sympathise with this, know the way they work, they get things done quickly, and so when somebody's is presenting a whole new tool, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm going to have to watch the 2-minute video to remember what to do at 1 o'clock in the morning. You're just not going to do that. So I think there's a mix of, yes, there are a bunch of people that just don't care, don't want to know, whatever, this is crap. And then there's quite a big bunch of people that probably in my generation may be going, oh, look, I'd really like to do this, but this is quite difficult, maybe a bit worried about, how to use it, all these sorts of things. So I think there's a point of there'll be some people you just go, leave them to it, no point. Then there's a bunch of people that will be full on, yes, they get stuck in and they want to use it. Let's say they're probably younger. And that's fine, by all means. But then there's a group of people where I think the key is to find a easy to use, effective use case. It does not have to be big and sexy. It can just be a really simple thing, but it actively saves them a little bit of time every day, every week, and it is super easy to use. And you just make sure that they can do that.
Yeah.
And then they will become interested. And I say that from experience in my firm and from listening to lots and lots of firms. Flexibility on all of these things. Get the right people involved in decision making. Be flexible according to what you need within the firm as well.
We've got a couple of minutes left, right? And I want to kind of bring it back to you, Alex. What happens when things do go wrong, right? You could have put the product through every single test you possibly could before you adopt. You're still going to get that time where someone comes along and says, oh, look, I was just trying to do this with this contract and it's done something really weird. How do you're the first point of contact in that situation within the business or people that work with you. How do you manage those when the supplier of the product is not there with you?
So, I mean, we have set that expectation. So every time you open up the GenAI tool, there is guidance there. One of those is validate, validate, validate. We remind people quite regularly. We try and nudge people to always upload a source. When we hear this stuff, what we do is we listen. That's kind of an important first step. And sometimes it's like, oh, okay, let's take that to the vendor and say, hey, this works a bit weirdly. Could you have a look? And sometimes it is a technical issue that we can solve. Sometimes it is just us learning and saying, actually, at the moment, these tools are rubbish for X. There was a while ago, very early in our experimentation, where our real estate team could just not use GenAI because the context windows were too small for lease reports to be useful.
Just wouldn't do it.
And so we just said, you know what? We'll come back to that team when the tool has improved. And actually, with Gemini and everything else, it kind of improved quite quickly, and it's great now, and they're big sponsors of this stuff. But it is listening, it's feeding back, it's being, it's coming back to what you were saying about vendors being honest. It's about the technology team being honest as well and saying, yep, that's really useful. We're not there yet with that, but here are some other good use cases that you can use.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Now, I've actually lost the timer here, so I don't know how long we've got left.
Just go forever.
Let's have a quick final word from each of you. Vicky, take us away.
I'm not going to respond to that one because actually my final word is to remind that point, I think, is that lawyers' job is not to use legal tech. Lawyers' job is to do their job using whatever is best. And so if you don't remember that when you are rolling out, when you are selling, whatever you are doing, ultimately, I don't think it's going to end in the best result, i.e. brilliant usage and widespread adoption, which means people keep it forever.
Wise words, Mike.
So that's made me think actually something else, which is basically the same thing for our role. Like my job is not to just buy tech. I'm not just like a tech procurement person that buys technology. My job is to properly drive change and put tools in people's hands that will have an impact. Some of that is by buying technology. Some of that is completely not by buying technology. It's changing people. It's changing education systems and the way we work and all that type of stuff. So they're almost in a similar vein to that.
Yeah, any of these rollouts need to be embedded in the practice groups, and they need to be led by lawyers with support from technology. If you do it the other way around, it won't work.
I think if you focus on delivering the best possible experience for your people and you execute with intention, you will infinitely increase your chance of success.
My last word is thank you very much for coming to this on a Friday morning, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and have a great weekend.